climate change, and I thought I would start with sort of an overview of local climate change, what's happening here, what's projected to happen, and then shift to talking about education and hand it over to Don to give an overview of all the work that we're doing. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I've called this climate change here at home. And first thing I want to do is actually acknowledge the Park Foundation, which funds our work in local climate change education. And we're really grateful for that support. So when I talk about home, for me, Ithaca has been home for a long time. So I was born in Boston, but my parents brought me here to Ithaca when I was just a few weeks old. So this is me in the late 1960s. You can see my father down there, Roald Hoffman, carrying me on his back. That's my mother, Eva Hoffman. Um, and I thought I'd kind of frame climate change around my time in Ithaca and what's been happening here. And again, what's projected to happen. So I'm going to be showing you data and projections from 3 different sources. One is the New York State Climate Impacts Assessment, which was published last year. The other is NOAA. They have a great source of climate change information for every county in the country. And then, of course, the Northeast Regional Climate Center here at Cornell. So let's start with spring. So this is a picture of my mother in the upper corner, my brother and me, and we live near what used to be the Cornell pig barns on Pine Tree Road, and it used to be that you could walk down there in the spring and see the piglets that had been born. So that's me and my brother. We're looking very stereotypically pink and blue. Um, you can see the way we're dressed. It looks like it's pretty cold. So I don't know, maybe this was late winter, or maybe it was early spring, or maybe it was a cold spring day like this past spring in Ithaca. We had a lot of cold days. So let's talk about spring temperatures and how those have changed. So I'm going to be showing you a graph of Tompkins County average spring temperature over time from 1965 to last year. And when I say average spring temperature, basically what that is you take a day, let's say March 1st, you record temperatures over that day, you average them all together to get a single average temperature for that day. And then you do it for the next day and the next day and for every day for March, April, May. And then you average all those averages together to get a single average spring temperature for that year. All right, so here come the data, and you see it goes up and down because weather fluctuates from year to year. But you can put a trend line on it, and you can see that from 1965 to now, there's been an increase in spring temperatures, and the trend is about almost half a degree Fahrenheit per decade. So our springs are getting warmer. Not a surprise, I think, if you live here, and it's happening in a lot of places around the country. One other thing that's been happening that you can see in plants is a change in plant life. So this is going to be a reel from an Instagram reel that we put out earlier this year. This is a sugar maple tree that we've been following for 10 years now, and looking at the date that that maple's leaf buds break open. And so those are the dates for the last 10 years. You can see a trend of the leaf buds opening earlier. So 10 years is not enough data to draw a conclusion to say that this is happening because our springs are getting warmer. To make that kind of conclusion, you'd need about 30 years of data or more. But the data are suggestive, and there are certainly other older records where people have seen spring arriving earlier because of these types of phenomena. All right, what about summer? So this is my grandmother and me down at Stewart Park having some cotton candy. I'm picturing it as kind of a pleasantly warm Ithaca summer day. So what's been happening to our summers? Actually, I'm going to show you some projections for the future. So these are projections of days with temperature above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So here we're talking about extreme heat. The baseline on this graph is the average over the 30-year period from 1981 to 2010. And during that baseline period, on average, This region has 9 days per year with the temperatures over 90. In the 2050s, that's projected to be somewhere between 24 to 42 days per year. And by the late century, 35 to 70 days per year.
Ingrid,
So,
sorry to interrupt. I have a question about how these numbers are derived because I know that there's concern that things that temperatures are not going to cool off as much in the nighttime. And
mhm.
so does this reflect the average 24-hour, or is it reflecting a daytime or a nighttime, or is this the average temperature above 90 or just the number of days where it hits above 90? Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, so this would be in a 24-hour period, and it would be a day where the temperature reaches above 90 at some point. So presumably that's going to be in the afternoon. And these projections come from global climate models that are then applied at a regional level. And the reason you see these ranges in them, 35 to 70, is because there are multiple models. I think there were 35 models, um, and they look at the results of those 35, and so there's a range of results. And the models try to capture the essential chemistry and physics of the atmosphere and the climate system, but they have slightly different assumptions. Um, yeah, so does that answer your question?
I think so. So I think what I heard you say is that this is the number of days where the temperature tops 90 degrees at some point during the day.
Correct.
So it's not really an average temperature over the course of the day or over the course of anything. Okay, thank you.
Not an average, yeah. And what you bring up is a very important point for health, that if the temperature doesn't cool down at night. So yeah, but I don't have data for those kind of projections.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Um, yeah, so it's a huge concern for human health, for other things as well. It's not just about being uncomfortable, it's about being safe. And so we need to prepare for this. I will say Tompkins County has some preparations in place. So we already have cooling centers. They're the blue dots on this map. This is from the New York State Department of Health. And they're typically places like libraries or community centers, campus buildings at Cornell and IC. At the Museum of the Earth, we're working on becoming a resilience hub, and part of that may be opening the museum as a cooling center or maybe a warming center for a winter weather emergency. All right, let's talk about rain. So this is a picture of my brother, my mother, and me out in what looks to be a very gentle rain because my brother has an umbrella, but my mother and I are out and we don't seem too unhappy. um, So, of course, in the past, we had gentle rains, we had heavy rains. Today, we have gentle rains, we have heavy rains, but things are changing. So, these are projections for heavy rainfalls, defined as where you get more than an inch of rain in a 24-hour period. The baseline for our region has been 5 days a year. By the 2050s, we're projected to get 6 to 8 days per year of heavy rain, and by the 2080s, 7 to 9 days per year. So you might look at these numbers and think, well, those are not really big changes. Like we're going from 5 to maybe 6 to maybe 7 days per year with heavy rain. But the thing to remember about that kind of extreme rainfall is that even one day can be a catastrophe, right? So this is some flooding from Interlaken in 2017, and we've all heard of these events. Um, so it really is a huge concern for flooding in our region. Going back to the past, this is a picture some of you may remember in 1972, Hurricane Agnes, which hit Corning and Elmira very hard, but also hit Ithaca hard. This is a picture looking from near Purity Ice Cream. This is back when Meadow Street was a two-way street, and you get some sense of that kind of extreme rain event. All right, snow. We can't talk about Ithaca climate without talking about snow. And I couldn't find any childhood pictures of my own of me playing in the snow, but I found this great one from the History Center that I think captures the experience of snow in Ithaca. This is from 1978. Um, even though I couldn't find any pictures, I have memories though. I have memories of playing in the snow when I was little, and I have memories of my brother and me digging these tunnels in what seemed to us to be huge snow drifts in the winter. Um, and as an adult, I've thought back on that and thought like it seems like we don't get as much snow as we used to, but I didn't know if that was true or if it's just because I was so much smaller then that the snow seemed a lot higher. So of course I looked up the data, and you can find it for Ithaca from the Northeast Regional Climate Center from their weather station on Game Farm Road. So this is snowfall in inches per year, so it's over a whole year. And again, it varies year to year. Some winters are snowier than others. But again, there's a definite downward trend and a pretty significant, so a 3-inch decrease in snowfall per decade. So over that, 60 years, that's 18 inches less of snowfall. So our climate is clearly changing, and that affects us, affects how we live, how we work, and then the question is what we can do about it. And I don't need to tell the people in this meeting, of course, there are 1,000 things we can do about it. But I wanted to just focus briefly on education as a solution. I think that a lot of people don't think of education as a climate change solution, and they don't think it can have a measurable impact. It seems sort of nebulous. So I just wanted to show you 3 examples of research studies where they did measure an impact of education. So one was published in 2022 by faculty at San Jose State University. They offered a year-long intensive climate change course to undergraduates, and then they followed those students long after they had graduated, over 5 years later, which is pretty rare to find that kind of study. And what they found was that in their personal behaviors, these former students had were lowering their carbon emissions almost 3 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, and they attributed their actions to having taken that course. So very clear impact from education to behavior. Now, of course, you could say, well, not everyone can take a course like that in college, and not everyone goes to college, and that's definitely true. Um, but it's good to see one example of the impact. Here's another example. This is a study done in Japan with middle and high school students, and they had a much less intensive program. It was over 7 months, but split into two sections, and they would have a class once a week where there was some discussion of energy saving behaviors, but it wasn't very intensive. They describe it as just nudges. So the kids were given stickers, or they were given recommendations for the default setting of certain appliances to save energy. And then the researchers were able to get access to the home electric and gas meters of these students' families, and they found that from the students having these sort of gentle nudges in school, that these households reduced their energy use, 3.7% in household CO2 emissions. And again, it was measurable, confirmed by these meter readings. So that's very positive that even a much less intensive program can have an effect. And then finally, this is a study back in the US in North Carolina for middle school students who had some climate change classroom activities. They had a service learning project. And then the researchers interviewed not just the students, but the parents of the students who were not involved in the education at all. But it turns out the kids had been bringing the ideas home. Um, this one did not track behavior change, but they measured attitude change. So we don't know if any of these families changed their behaviors, but attitude change can be, not guaranteed to be, but can be a first step. So at PRI, we certainly value education. We think it's important. We think it can have a measurable impact. And this is just sort of a collage of many different things we do. But I think I'll stop here and stop sharing and hand it over to Don to talk more about those things.
Thanks, Ingrid. Oops, that's not actually what I meant to show. All righty. We're going to start off with a couple of questions. And let's see if I can see more of you. Um, if you know someone who was born in about, oops, I clicked ahead when I didn't mean to. There we go. Do you know someone who is approximately a high school freshman? And you can raise your hands, and that means somebody born in about 2010, a 15-year-old. Okay, so most hands went up there. Do you know someone who was born in the 2020s, somebody under 5? So some of us do. Um, Almost everyone here loves someone who will be alive in the next century. A child born in 2010 will turn 90 in 2100. A child born today will turn 75. And I'm guessing that all of us know somebody who's 75 or so, and most of us know someone who's over 90. And so when we hear about those projections for climate in 2100 or 2050, I think it's really important to recognize that that's really not that far away. Um, and uh, and we're not doing a good enough job right now on climate change education writ large to help people understand those things. And so PRI introduced the Center for Climate Change Education just about a year ago, late September of last year. And why did we do that? Well, because there's an urgent need to rapidly improve climate change education. If you ask any teenager if they've received the climate change education that they want or deserve, almost universally you're going to hear no, they haven't. Most teachers don't have any preparation to teach climate change. And of course, it's here and now and negatively affecting nearly all of us. And Ingrid just gave us a good glance at some of that. We want to produce high quality, we are producing high quality educational materials for teaching and learning about climate change and energy. We provide professional development. We've been offering a range of public programs in person and online, making museum, nature center, and online exhibits, and serving the climate change education community, and working to improve educational policy related to climate change education. We also want to simplify our introductions. For years, I've been at PRI since 2008, so 17 years. And for much of that time, I introduced myself as Don Haas from the Paleontological Research Institution, its Museum of the Earth, and its Cayuga Nature Center, and I do climate change education. It is a lot easier to say, I'm Don Haas from the Center for Climate Change Education at PRI, and if people want to know what PRI stands for, then we can get there. We've been doing this work for a couple of decades at least, and we've risen to being a national leader in climate and energy education. We think that understanding Earth history can be a valuable part of understanding climate change. And one of my favorite little factoids related to that is that for 90% of Earth history, there was essentially no fire. And that's because there was no life on land to provide the fuel, and there wasn't enough oxygen in the atmosphere. And now the driving force of climate change is humans burning stuff. So fire is incredibly important, and it's very helpful to understand it in the context of Earth history. So, who we are, Ingrid and I are part of PRI's 4-person climate team, along with Rob Ross and Alex Moore. And we also have some scientist partners, Toby Alt at Cornell, Ben Luce, who is chair of the board of directors of the American Solar Energy Society, Frank Tellis, who's a PhD student working with Toby Alton. Frank is out at Northern Arizona University, and Ben Brown Steiner, who is a research associate at PRI, and he up until recently was an NSF staff person, and I forget the name of his new employer, but he is continuing to work with us, and he does climate change modeling. What do? We do educator professional development in person and online. That's a picture of local teachers from a workshop last summer, and an online session on how to confront climate change denial in your classrooms. Here's some stuff that's coming up at the end of September in partnership with Cooperative Extension and the Science Center. We'll be doing a climate education resource fair and professional development workshop at the Science Center. And that is that particular week to bring Climate Week to Ithaca. New York City's Climate Week is the week that ends September 27th. And we'll be doing October 4th a workshop for teachers in the master teacher programming called master teacher program rather called Biological Responses to Climate Change. And I just, whoops, there we go. Here's looking at climate change in New York State through the plant hardiness zones map, and you can check out the change in between 2023 and 2012, fairly substantial. And so that'll be a piece of what we're doing on October 4th. At the State Science Teachers Conference, the Science Teachers Association of New York State has their annual conference in early November. And for the last 3 years, we've been working in partnership with them on the PRI Stannis Institute. This year's theme is finding climate change solutions from across the sciences. So looking across earth science, biology, chemistry, and physics. And some things from the past. We just earlier this month finished up a workshop with teachers who serve the Seneca Nation on energy and water for our future, a 3-day workshop that was in both Irving and Salamanca, New York, and that's the beginning of a 2-year program, which is NOAA funded, and funding began January 1st. I live in fear every day that we're going to get an email that says that funding is canceled, but it's living on for right now, and I hope it will continue through the end of next year. We've done online programming with Marianne Krasny, who I'm guessing quite a few of you know, and that was last year's PRI Stannis Institute. I do a program called on 2x4s, graphite and gasoline, what I'd teach about climate change if I only had an hour, and I'll do a little teaser for that by pulling out a block of graphite. Graphite's pure carbon. This is 2x2x6 inches, weighs a little over 1.5 pounds. I want you to think about, and we'll come back to in the Q&A, how this compares to the amount of carbon in a gallon of gasoline. Is it a lot more, a lot less, about the same? And we'll come back to that. So ponder that. And we had James Balog join us a couple of years ago for Earth Day programming. We publish for researchers and practitioners. So there are some of our publications, the Teacher Friendly Guide being the most well-known of those. We publish a newsletter. Next one's coming out in a couple of weeks, 5 times a year, called Learning Earth for Educators. We have a YouTube channel with substantial content. We develop exhibits and both at the Nature Center, at the museum, and online. We work in service with the climate change education community. Ingrid is on the board of a group called Subject to Climate, which actually began their work by hosting professional development that was based, at least in part, on the Teacher Friendly Guide to Climate Change. And they have grown substantially since that beginning. The Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network, or CLEAN. I was on a founding member of that back in, I think, about 2009, and I continue to serve on its leadership board, and that's a national organization of climate change educators. It has been NSF funded up until 2025, and we're actually meeting next week to figure out how we're continuing to work. The National Science Teaching Association, I served on the panel that wrote their climate change education position paper back in 2019, which was updated in December of 2024. I'm a past president of the National Association of Geoscience Teachers and led the development of their substantial revision of their position paper on teaching climate change. And PRI is a member of Climate and Resilience Education Task Force, which is a New York statewide group working with climate change educators across the state to improve climate change education policy in New York State. I'm going to say a little bit more about that right now. Virtually everyone wants better climate change education in K-12 schools in New York State. The national average is 77%. I believe for New York State, it's 84% on schools, on the question of should schools teach global warming. And unsurprisingly, you can see that Ithaca is the darkest red county, or close to the darkest red county, showing that they support it a lot. Um, and let's see. CREF is advocating for K-12 climate change education. Check out cretf.org for seeing their work. And we have advocated for the last couple of years for a bill to support the teaching of climate change, and worked with the state folks in the state education department to develop the language for that bill, and it hasn't worked. And now, last year, we shifted focus to split it between advocating for the bill and advocating for appropriation to support it. This year we'll just be working, we won't, I don't think we will propose a bill this year, but rather an appropriation, which will get the work done without needing to pass a bill, which I could go on for a very long time about the difficulty of educational legislation that actually changes what's taught. It is a nightmare, in spite of virtually every constituency wanting to improve climate change education. Actually making that happen through law is very, very difficult. But changes are happening just the same. The portrait of a graduate um, slash, which is, I guess, recently changed its name to New York Inspires, lays out the expectations for high school graduates in New York State, beginning in, I think, the 26-27 school year. And it includes expectations for climate literacy for all graduates. There is also a program called the Seal of Civic Readiness, which is an opportunity for students to get a seal on their diploma that says they have engaged in some kind of civic action. And that is a great candidate for climate action. The new science regents exams include substantial climate content. Two of them were just debuted in June of this year in earth science and biology, and school districts across the state had the choice of starting that this year or next year. Next year as in next week. So all schools will have the new earth science and biology uh, standards in place for the 25-26 school year. And this year, starting next week, the chemistry and physics standards will be taught for the first time in schools that choose to do it. It's worth noting that New York City um, is opting in the first year for both earth science and biology last year, and physics and chemistry for this year. And New York City has 1.1 million of the 2.4 million K-12 students in New York State. Um, those new science regents exams, particularly the Earth's, let me step back on that sentence. The Earth Science Regents exam that debuted in June of this year, I am sure has more climate change content than any state exam in the US. And that is, I think, a very good thing. Some teachers were caught off guard by how much new new climate content was on the exam, and those are hot links. I'll share the PDF with Peter to share this, and you can take a look. And it is literally about half the earth science exam has direct connections to climate change and energy issues. It's also worth noting that the CLCPA has expectations for climate ed, but those, like other things, uh, Oops. No, there we go. No, I'm confused. I just made these slides, so I don't know what I have in them. um, but it's very much worth noting that climate change is not just science, and we are advocating for teaching climate change across the grade span and across the curriculum. My favorite example my favorite two examples of demonstrating that are the Industrial Revolution started us taking stuff out of the ground and burning it. And whenever we change how we get history, or I'm sorry, whenever we change how we get energy, we change history. And there's a lot that can be said about that. And my other is that we do a really generally a pretty lousy job of helping people understand the difference between 1,000, a million, a billion, and a trillion, of understanding scale. And that's a mathematical issue that we need to do so much better, because I honestly believe if everyone understood scale in a meaningful way, the world would be so much a better place. And I can say a lot about that. This thought exchange is NICEAD asking for input, NICEAD being the New York State Education Department, asking for input on the portrait of a graduate. And you can look at the materials there and give them feedback up until October 12th. Oh, and I lost a picture there. So we also do public programming. So there's some of that. Science in the Pub begins the fourth Thursday of September and goes the second and fourth Thursdays of the month throughout the academic year. And we have a lot of climate change and energy content on that. How we are funded. So our work historically has been funded by the National Science Foundation, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Park Foundation, and a substantial endowment from anonymous bequest, as well as generous donations by hundreds of supporters, fucking people just like you. And I think that's my last slide. So Ingrid and I can take questions on all the things.
Thanks, Don and Ingrid. I probably should just remind people that I've been involved as a trustee with the PRI for many years now, and trustee emeritus. But so I have a declared interest in this, and I wanted to see if you could just talk, and you'll have to divide this among yourselves. So I won't assign this, but to talk a little bit about the newest developments with relationship building with the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and
Yes, sure.
how that may impact the education work the two of you are doing going forward.
Yeah, so we started, well, we have a long history of working with the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and they are concerned about our financial difficulties, and they want to work with us. We think we have some good synergies. They are interested in expanding their footprint of working with schools in upstate New York, and they know that we're doing good work on that front. Our first real project together in 2025 is working on a program with them called Museum in a Box, that they are developing in cooperation with the BOCES across the state. BOCES is Board of Cooperative Educational Services, and there are dozens of BOCES across the state that serve the smaller school districts than the big five districts, which do those cooperative educational services on their own. So this would be a program mostly for elementary schools, where a box would come from the American Museum of Natural History with the first box will be based on dinosaur fossils. And we have worked with them to, first off, we had some panels with upstate teachers to give them feedback on developing the program. And we anticipate that will help deliver professional development associated with those boxes once they're developed. I think the plan is to maybe pilot late this year and start implementation next year, late this school year, I mean, so in the spring. And other connections that we have that we may grow is I have been involved in their Masters of Arts in Teaching program for many years, although that the last time I did stuff face to face with their Masters of Arts in Teaching program was back in January of 2020, and then March of 2020 came along and kind of interrupted that collaboration. So I did workshops for their teacher candidates on developing virtual fieldwork experiences, so we anticipate that will help with programming like that Museum in a Box program. They will also be presenting with us this year at this Science Teachers Association of New York State. And they have a professional development program online that I'm currently blanking on the name of. But we may be teaching courses in that program. And what am I forgetting, Ingrid?
No, I think you covered it well. I'll just add something about professional development for teachers. Don was just talking about it and mentioned more we've done, and that's something that we really lean into because of the multiplier effect. So if you can help 100 teachers teach better about climate change, then you're reaching thousands, tens of thousands of students. So that kind of work we feel is very valuable.
Thank you. Nancy has.
So you mentioned the issue of financial difficulties at PRI, Don, and I just wanted to just remind people that the institution is really in crisis, and that this is due mostly because a donor who has given millions of dollars to PRI over the years had to pull a plug on a major commitment going forward that has actually put the mortgage of the museum at risk. It's in the hands now of a private, what's the word? Not venture capitalist, but anyways, it's in the hands of equity investment company that is trying to get as much money out of the mortgage as possible before they walk away and shut the place down. So I just really want to make it clear to folks, this is an institution that baseline has one of the largest collection of invertebrate fossils in the world. And that's related to climate change because it provides a baseline in measuring how the climate has changed over the past and how we might manage to anticipate what we face going forward. And I think, as many of you know, we're really just in the earliest stages of what could become the sixth mass extinction event in the planet's history. So this is just trying to raise awareness here that any gifts you can make are really, really important at this stage in the institution's history. And I think we've been fortunate in seeing a real strong increase in the number of donations that have come in, especially during the summer when it's typically a slow season. And there have been some major donors who've stepped up to the tune of $1 million and made it a match. I can't remember the name, but there's a national science organization recognizing the financial situation at PRI as an organization just donated $2,000 towards this effort to raise the money needed to pay the mortgage off, so that the private equity folks will just leave us alone.
Go away.
So there's amazing work going on at PRI in the midst of this fiscal storm, and I just wanted to recognize the fact that Ingrid and Don are really working under very, very stressful conditions to make this work happen. And I wanted to express my admiration for your resilience in the face of this, because it's what you're doing is just so absolutely important. And just to, again, to help put this in context, the trustees have had to really focus on how we keep the place afloat in the midst of it. And it's had two concrete results. One is the Center for the Nature Center, Cuga Nature Center, is in the process of being, we hope, turned over to the state park system. And as I understand it, the PRI staff will still be there in terms of day-to-day operations, but it'll be in the hands, the land and the center, in the hands of the state park system, if that works out. And then when it comes, another resource at PRI has been Smith Woods, which is one of the oldest, one of the most significant old growth forests in the state, oddly enough, in the middle of Trumansburg Village. But that also had been managed for many years by PRI, and it's been gifted now to, oh God, is it the town of Ulysses, or is it this village of? No, it's not the village of Trumansburg. So there's a paring back here, necessary to maintain survival of PRI. So I just wanted to put all that in front of you folks. I had a question, Ingrid and Don, if you're aware of the work of the Climate Initiative, which is based in Maine. They in Maine bring climate education to teachers and teachers in training, and they've reached out to the Park Foundation and then through Nick to me, and I've just had a little bit back and forth via email, and I know they were interested in today's presentation in particular. They weren't able to attend because the staff is off for the Labor Day weekend. But I know they're going to watch the recording and will want to reach out and have a conversation with you folks. Is that an organization that's been on your radar screen at all?
I know of them, but I don't know much about them. Excuse me.
Yeah, I've certainly heard of them, but I don't know about their work in detail.
Well, I think you're going to find out more about it.
Okay.
I'm just sort of giving you a heads up there.
I will also note that my climate change education work began a long time ago, and as Ingrid shared some stuff from a long time ago, I will also note that Jennifer was one of my earth science teachers in Norwich, or my earth science students rather, when I was teaching high school in Norwich a long time ago.
Yeah, nice.
Can confirm that's true. Hi. Sorry, I've been listening to you the whole time and just sitting here off camera, but good to see you as always.
Good to see you.
Your previous life, Jennifer, I knew nothing about teaching in Norwich.
There's
She
actually
wasn't teaching, she was
there's
my-
multiple students of Don's living around here, actually. I'm not the only one, but yeah, it's small world.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, it's great.
And I will note too that the Regents Earth Science curriculum has had the greenhouse effect in it since 1971, but it was 1 or 2% of the.
What? You want to fill up some water?
Somebody needs to put
Hello?
themselves on mute.
Yeah, I do.
And
There we go. Now you're on mute. I try to monitor that, but it's a fluid situation. Let's leave it at that. David.
I'm gonna follow up with you later about some other things as a heads up that are related to this. But a more general question is, could you just say a little bit more about where PRI kind of and the museum actually as well fit in the world of museums that are involved in this kind of education about climate and energy work? And I know, for example, that the Wild Center up in the Adirondacks is another New York institution, but I don't really have a good sense of sort of how you position yourselves, if you will, at the national level around this kind of work.
Well, the Wild Center is another national leader in climate change education and their Youth Climate Action Summit program, where usually high school, sometimes college, sometimes middle school students get together and have a climate summit where they vow to take some kind of action. And usually these are annual events where the students come back and report on things they've done in the past. And the folks at the Wild Center are also members of the Climate and Resilience Education Task Force and working with us on New York State climate change education. We also co-hosted with them this summer part of a national, the Teach Climate Network, which is run through Climate Generation out of Minnesota, has a summer institute for teachers that is a 3-day event, the first 2 days of which are online and involve speakers and programming from across the country. And then the third day is either a state or a regional cohort. And we co-hosted the regional cohort this July with folks from the Wild Center. So did I hit on all that you asked there, David?
Well, you had very beautifully about the relationship with the Wild Center. Maybe I'll ask it about how do those two institutions kind of fit into the landscape of museums doing this kind of work. So
yeah, so there are at least a couple of networks that we're involved in of museums. CRETF is one that has museums and other kinds of energy or institutions. The 20 Museums 2030, is that the right name, Ingrid? Is another
30 District Museum Network, yeah.
That's another group of museums that are working on both climate change education and climate change as related to the infrastructure of the institutions. And there's another group that's headquartered by the Phipps Conservatory in Pittsburgh that I am blanking on the name of, that we are also a participant in. And we have done work with, and that work with Phipps is connected to Aztec, the Association of Science and Technology Centers, and we have done work with Aztec as well. So that's some of the museum stuff. Do you have anything to add, Ingrid?
Yeah, I guess I would just say it's generally very collaborative. And a lot of it the interaction has been through CLEAN, the Climate Literacy and Energy Awareness Network that Don mentioned. They have these weekly teleconferences, or they did until recently when they lost funding. But that has built up a network of people and organizations, many of which include museums, aquariums, science centers. I think within New York State too, it's been more sort of in-depth outreach. So, collaborations with the Wild Center, or another example is maybe about 8-10 years ago, there's a boat maritime museum in Kingston, New York, and along the Hudson River. And they contacted me and said, we want to build a climate change exhibit into our museum and connect it with boats on the river and waterways. And we met and talked, and we've had that kind of level interaction too, very detailed planning with other museums, just sharing ideas.
Yeah, and I just
Yeah,
put,
Don, you mentioned the 2030 District Museum Group. I work with that committee, I think three or four other folks who are directors of 2030 districts across the network, now 26 different districts. And that, of course, is been great to see the involvement of PRI and the Science Center, both of whom are members of the 2030 district in those workshops, seminars. But for me, it's been really interesting to see the variety of museums across the country that are working on issues around climate, sustainability, resilience, that sort of thing. And it is gives me some hope in the midst of all of the darkness that surrounds us. Nancy.
Hi. I have two unrelated questions. One, you mentioned that you do talk about solutions, and I'm wondering if you make use of Climate Interactive's En-ROADS.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And then the other one is on adult education. What are you doing there? I know you have Science in the Pub, but how broadly? Is that just in Tompkins County, or does that go beyond?
Well, Science in the Virtual Pub's online, so
Oh, right, and Virtual Pub.
so we do
Sorry about that.
we do reach folks nationally on that. We just concluded, well, that's so I think in terms of adult education with a reach beyond Tompkins County, it's probably mostly through that's not educator focused. We do a lot of work with educators who are
Right,
mostly adults.
right.
But I think the the museum exhibits and the Earth at Home content, which we didn't say very much about, but that is content online for teaching or learning about all kinds of Earth system science content with a big focus on climate change. And we do occasional public programs that are focused on climate change, but that's again mostly at the museum. I sometimes get invited to speak in various settings, sometimes in other places around the country, but we don't have a big national program for adults.
Yeah.
I'll mention one project I worked on a few years ago. So myself, a few people at Cornell, people at SUNY ESF and at Clarkson developed and then ran a climate change education course for NYPA, for employees of NYPA. So the CEO of NYPA at that time decided that he wanted every employee to learn about climate change, so that to help motivate them to reach their CLCPA goals. It was mandatory along with the other training that all employees have to take, like, sexual harassment training and worker safety training. They had to take climate change training. So we developed this course and ran it. It was during the pandemic, so there were both e-learning modules that the employees would take on their own, and then we had live virtual sessions, which were much more interactive. We used En-ROADS in that, actually, in the section about climate solutions, and the employees loved it. I led the development of 2 units on climate science. And yeah, so that was an example of corporate climate change education. But that was one project. It's not something that we have done since then, but we would certainly be open to doing it again.
So I'm wondering about so the virtual science pubs, how do you advertise that? How do you let people know about that?
Social media, newsletters, um, email lists that are hitting folks of potential interest, and so that's most of it.
I think it's often posted in the Green Scene that Tom Hirasuna publishes for the Tompkins County Environmental Management Council.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll note too that the calendar for Science in the Virtual Pub is set for the fall, but I have all of the speakers lined up, but I don't have all of the titles and descriptions there yet. But that should be up in a week or so for starting on September 25th, I think.
So we do have to wrap up, but I just wanted to say thanks, Don and Ingrid, for taking the time to meet with us today. And